Hey, I'm Greg.
And I'm Mom, or Tonya.
And this is, let's say it together, Ask Mom and Dad. Yeah, we did it different. I wanted to do it a little different today, so I figured I would not tell you about it and just spring it on you, because that is the best way to build trust in relationships.
Okay.
Don't you think? And that would be a perfect segue if I was going to say how to build trust in relationship was the topic today.
No, but it's not.
We should bookmark that one because I'm sure you could tell some stories.
Funny story, because I'm pretty sure that's what happened to the cat when the skunk came through. I'm pretty sure it was a, surprise and reactive because the cat's not around anymore.
Well, that's what we would call
smell left over.
Stories out of context.
No, you
tell
just
the story.
said. I wanted you to you said.
Want me to tell it? What? Go ahead.
No, you just said. I wanted to take you by surprise, and that's what the segue was.
Oh, I got you.
Pretty sure the cat was taken by surprise by the wandering skunk through our.
So we own
premises.
A cat now, is what we're trying to take.
No,
or
we don't.
Cat owns us.
Cat owns us. Yeah.
We don't know how the cat came to own us, but the cat came to own us somehow, and you're referring to the fact that this morning when you came back from your morning run,
the cat's gone, but the smell of skunk is everywhere. So I'm assuming
which like 10 minutes prior I had gone
happened.
Outside and there was nothing. I mean, it was a normal smelling day.
So see, you just missed it. You missed the whole
what's crazy
exciting
is,
time.
We live in Tennessee now, but I've lived in Washington State for so long. When I first smelled it, I thought, oh, someone's smoking weed.
I know it did not smell the exact same. There's a difference. They do have similar qualities, but...
And
thank
we
the Lord
say that because we lived around a place
true.
where there was a lot of weed smoking, not because we have any personal experience with that. Speaking of decisions, I told you that I could find a segue into our topic for today. We're going to talk about decisions, and specifically decisions that happen in the news. Court decisions.
Speaking of, where did that come from? Speaking of
the decisions that we've made good decisions in our lives not to smoke marijuana.
You
were clearly not paying attention.
No. Mine was better segue than that one. I'm sorry.
Okay. Today's topic is now, who segues better? Me or Tonya? Anyway, I don't own a Segway. So that's it. If anyone's old enough to remember.
Ride.
Yeah, nowadays, where do you see Segways nowadays? Those little two-wheeler things. Pretty much you only see them in like tour companies and places. You can get on a Segway tour. Never done that. That would be weird. I don't know that I ever want to do that either. I saw someone on a three-wheeled tricycle. I mean, three-wheeled, not tricycle. A three-wheeled like scooter. You know how they got the scooters and they're kind of two-wheeled. Well, they are kind of three. Anyway, you'd have to see it to understand it. And since we're just doing an audio broadcast, that doesn't make any sense at all.
I have a picture.
All right. So we're going to run through some subject matter here today and kind of do like what's some decisions in the news, that kind of thing. And I thought we would begin to kind of comb through some things that were like in the news. I mean, June's an interesting month. It's over. We're in July now. We just came off of the 4th of July weekend. I guess we could have done that, but I didn't think about doing that either. So happy 4th of July previously. I mean, last week we just asked a lot of questions and decided we were going to try and figure out from that game.
Yeah, I really wish we would have thought to talk about that because there's a lot. I feel like there's a little bit coming back into our country of appreciating the freedoms that we have and waking people up to that in this new generation. We've heard about how they, first of all, don't appreciate America because of the schools they've grown up that has kind of tainted them the other direction. But there are many who are rebelling against that. And there's a good homeschool movement that has reawakened, I think, the appreciation for our freedoms. And so anyway, we could talk about that. But you had another thought.
Yeah.
That's got to do with our country and our freedoms.
Yeah, that's kind of where it was at. At first I was going to play a little silly, Facebook game and just say, what's next to you right now? What's important to you? And to keep sitting right around you, because I was looking through before we did the podcast. I was cleaning up around me because I tend to throw things in the bench where I sit a lot when I'm working stuff, and I found that apparently sharpening knives are important to me, and so what's next to you now is relevant because those are things that are important to us. And so some of the things that keep around you.
Well, we can talk about that instead then.
No, not instead. I'd have just a second. Work with me here because obviously I surprised you with the whole point. Yeah. So ahead. What are the things that are of value that you keep right next to you? Just a little to get to know Tonya a little bit. What are the things that you'd like to keep close at hand? That's all I'm really saying.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that for quite
Briefly.
a while actually because I've got.
I know we can, but I wanted. There's two things I want to just bear with me. I'll control you through the course of this journey that we're taking right now, unsuccessfully, because we found out that Woods and Olivia got married this week. Not Olivia. No.
Oh my goodness!
It was a joke.
And
Nobody
where
got
is
married.
that coming from?
From
now?
the Discord, I finally caught up on our family Discord and saw what was going on, and I laughed about the fact that Vivian and Woods jokingly got married this morning, and because they're 4 and
you weren't behind.
5, and I wasn't behind.
It was a joke. It was just put up after I talked about McDonald's saying you could get married now for $200, and that includes chicken nuggets.
In Jakarta, by the way, I finally read that article.
I don't know. I didn't read the whole article. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, it is funny. It's hilarious because weddings are expensive these days. Anyway, no, the joke with Woods was just that I made the joke because I'm smart that Vivian made him take her last name because she's Vivian and she's just a hard-headed kid. Anyway, things that are important to us, like a last name or something. I'm just was asking that question. I wanted to start with that this morning, so I figured I'd ask you what was important to you that you keep close at hand because there's numbers of things.
Okay,
and
well,
not a long conversation about it. But
my
what are
Bible
some
and
things
my
you close?
journal. I have some Epic Times newspapers because I appreciate looking through those. I try to save the good articles or ones I want to pass on, as well as the puzzles because I know get them done very fast. And I like the fact that it is a conservative newspaper and it's fun to read.
Yeah, see, that's all I needed. A whole lot. Because we're going to actually transition again into this. The Epic Times had a piece in it this week that I saw that was what's the news of the week. And it had kind of just a list of major issues that happened during the week, like in a review. And I was like, well, that's easy. I should just do that so I won't be halfway mad at the news a lot of times.
But that is a good conversation in itself. So that's
Right.
why. So we're segueing again. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
I want to keep people following. What is the point of having an ADHD host if you don't run off on some rabbit trails? I mean, come on.
Or just rabbit, no actual trail, right? Just never mind.
There is something to be
Go
said
ahead.
about paving a path for the first time. Well, there's a couple things I wanted us to talk about. There's a couple of good things that happen and celebrate some wins and some things, and the couple of the cases that happened really throughout the month of June, not just this last week. I thought we might spend a few minutes talking on.
Now you're back to the Supreme Court.
It's not just Supreme Court. There's just courts in general. Some things that are happening out in the world. I can give you a couple of them. So there was the Christian Baker's decision in Oregon. Well, we're back to things that affect families, I think, and faith. And so there's Christian Baker's issue in Oregon. That was another case decided, and I think this has to do with boundaries and pushing boundaries. There was the affirmative action thing. That's education that was going on there, and then there's that I had 4, but the one of them's not related to it at all. It's kind of a question like the first thing I just threw you for a loop for, which was kind of random, which was Tennessee, because we're in Tennessee. It got my attention. Tennessee Supreme Court says no to restoring voting rights, which was a decision that a felon who was from Virginia. Virginia's law allows felons over time to return to have their voting rights restored. Well, this felon moved to Tennessee, and Tennessee's law doesn't permit him to vote. And so he filed suit and lost. And so that was interesting. So the question is, should a felon have the right to have the right to vote, return to him? And apparently the type of felon that he is was a no on that question. So it was interesting. And then the other one is one that just ruled in Oregon, which was a ban on, there's 5 states in the country that have bans on recording in public. In other words, we're capturing someone's opinion or something. So say you're in public having a conversation with someone and you secretly record them. 5 states have bans on that you can't do that. You can, but or like if you recording a protest or filming something, you can't. There's certain rules. Well, Oregon apparently passed a law trying to. What it boils down to.
It was trying to stop Project Veritas.
Exactly. Try to stop people who would do journalism,
find truth,
get someone to tell the story because they're quote not recording it, and so that was overturned by the Oregon Supreme Court, which I think is interesting because Oregon. The lawmakers are fairly liberal, apparently the Supreme Court. And of course, it points out in the article they were both of the judges that spoke for the majority were both Bush appointees. So it's like, the court system, it's interesting because the court system itself, given states or circuits, depending on who the president was that appointed him, you may very much have a more conservative leaning court, even in a liberal place, which does strike an interest to me in the idea that there is a balance to some degree when it's done that way. It creates.
Forefathers set it up.
Our forefathers did a good job of confusing things such that it's really, really hard to just take over America. So the idea behind this is these are some actual wins that came through court decisions that favor families, that favor freedom I guess, and families, this thing. So the first one, let's just talk about it for a second. Are you familiar? You're familiar with the Christian Baker's one? Tell me what you remember about it and what your thoughts are on it. I'll stop talking for a minute.
Well, actually, I don't know the Oregon one. I heard the Supreme Court one this week. That was the graphic designer, online graphic designer, who won her case against, being made to do one for a gay couple or something like that. I can't remember the exact thing, but that was a Supreme Court decision. So I don't know. This Oregon one was the Baker thing. I didn't remember hearing. I thought that was already settled a while back, so it must have gone. It must have been settled in a lower court and went to a higher court. I didn't know about it for sure, but similar idea. I'm assuming this has been the trend recently, is that these Supreme Court justices are realizing that freedom is freedom, so that these businesses can say no, just like we have. I think we discussed this even once, how you can, these businesses, you can walk into a business and see a sign that says, we will reserve the right to refuse service. So if that is true and can be put up in any given business here or there, why is it not true when these particular cases have come up? That's weird to me. But someone has brought it to court, like, that's not right. You can't refuse service to me or whatever. But most of the time when you walk in and you see that sign, you get the idea, the understanding that a belligerent patron or someone who goes right against whatever it might even be. It used to be the no shoes, no service kind of thing, where they didn't come in appropriately and respect the business. That used to be just a kind of given. So these court cases must be that it's taking it a little further. It's deciding to deal with a little bit heavier of issues, and obviously someone has thrown a fit and gone in. That's how I would put it. Tried to get their way. But anyway, so praise the Lord. It seems as if it's still that the business should be able to choose who they serve or not, especially
I think it's
a business that's privately owned.
I'm wondering what the difference is. The two cases happen within hours of each other's, and I only read the one because being a news hawk that I am, who pays some attention to the news. Well, let's just be ADHD.
Zero,
the point of the beginning of this podcast is so I can make the statement. I read headlines. And so I'm looking at this.
Which is how you read books. You've always told me to.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I read books if I'm reading a topic or reviewing a topic or something that's updated, I read for the updates, just like I would like computer software. In other words, if I'm reading a topic on a theological subject I'm quite familiar with,
I know. You would just read the main parts or whatever and kind of get the gist of it.
But I'm also
I don't do that very well,
so the ADHD in me, the details are helpful.
Well, because I can get lost in them like anyone, but I also don't think exactly on the same line as everyone else, like you do. Like you assume you do, even with me. I know what you're going to say, so you finish, Anyway, that's just a joke. But
I'm not sure what you're implying.
No, I get what you do. Well, I used to think you actually literally did kind of speed read, and you do in a sense because you can glance over something and get the gist of it from major points, right? Mm-hmm. On a lot of things you read, not everything you read, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so I think that's what you were saying, but. Go ahead and talk about, so you had seen a couple of those headlines.
Both articles are in the review. And again, I'm using the Epic Times because that's why I asked the question, what's next to you? Because I know you got a stack of them there. They're both here. You've got, let's see here. So
that's giant.
That is very giant.
Your pictures.
Yeah, I think it's designed for an iPhone. So I'm looking at it on my big iPad, and so it's like massive images with tiny titles. This is like headlines for the reading disabled. Where'd it go? Okay, so you've got the Christian designer case. That's the one you brought up, right?
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
And it says, let's see if we can just look at it together for a second and say what the difference is.
And I'm right, it's the federal Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, both of them are federal Supreme Court. That's why I was curious.
I thought you said Oregon. The other one was Oregon.
So it says that okay, let me just read a few paragraphs. As the Supreme Court ruled that Colorado cannot compel a website designer to create messages that go against her Christian beliefs, both Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Gorsuch clashed in separate opinions. Today, the court, for the first time in its history, grants a business open to the public the constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. That's what Sotomayor wrote. claiming that the
Protecting
6-3
class.
majority ruling was backlash to the movement for liberty and equality for gender and sexual minorities.
I want to understand what it means by class. Never mind. I guess.
Yeah, hang on. Let me see here. Pulse nightclub. This is Sotomayor's view. I just want to get the basic. Federal prosecutor Sotomayor also made reference. Sotomayor talked about all the things she's mad about in the decision. The ruling favored artist Lori Smith. Here it is. The ruling favored artist Lori Smith, who sued the state of Colorado over its anti-discrimination laws that had prohibited businesses providing sales or other accommodations to the public based on their sexual orientation. Sotomayor also claimed the majority ruling reduced LGBT people to second-class status. So, yeah, this goes back to the whole idea of trying to turn sexual orientation into a class rather than into a sexual issue. And
so bizarre the way our culture has twisted these phrasings and definitions to literally kind of brainwash us to a particular think set. It just confuses me. I don't understand. Up to now, I read something the other day that said, I don't care what you do in the bedroom, but would you keep it there? Basically, why does it need to affect us, what someone chooses to do in their private settings? But they have declared this is some sort of, like you said, class, or almost like they've tried to create a race out of a different, quote, sexual orientation.
Yeah.
Super deceptive in that. And that's irritating. I guess that's
and the same thing. So the second article is on the same issue. Listen, the Supreme Court ruled on June 30 in favor of a Christian baker who said Christian bakers plural, who said Oregon's law required them to make cakes to celebrate same-sex weddings infringed on their constitutional rights. Excuse me.
Okay, so this is the other direction.
This is coming from the Bakers Association. You got the graphic artists. Basically, you have businesses who are suing because they have belief systems.
Well, like I said,
about sexual orientation.
Yes, but like I said, a business could put up a sign that said they can choose to not service someone. And do you not know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So in these cases, it's as if they have been told, no, this particular type of people group doesn't fit into that category. Like they're unique over here.
I think that and I didn't comment on that a second ago because I'm processing it. But I think that the issue of we right to refuse service to anyone, that statement, I think if someone refused it and they stated because they were a black person or a Chinese person, that could get challenged and overthrown.
And
because that's public and services. That's an issue of of race / class, whatever. If you're too poor or too rich.
Well, like I said, they're
although
trying to make
there are clubs
LGBTQ,
all over the country
whatever,
where
into a race.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There are clubs all over the country that class people out by making it too expensive for poor people to come in there. You know.
Yeah, but then that would literally be class as opposed to race.
A class thing, exactly.
But what I was trying to say is that used to just be a given, that it's a freedom in our country for people to choose. And like I said, that no shirt, no shoes, no service thing was just kind of a courtesy.
Considered decency.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. And that the business was its own business. Now, of course, in this day and age, kind of, the customer is seen as the one to be served, which is right. But the business still it's its own entity. It has its own freedoms as well.
Right.
So we've always kind of understood in the backdrop of that they could refuse if they wanted to whoever for whatever reason. Now, I agree with you. Certain types of refusals in the past was not. It would be like saying this one's human and this one's not. That's ridiculous and crazy. This isn't true for this. This is a belief system. So it's not got to do with someone.
Right. Well, here's the thing that's interesting is I'm thinking about this. Tucker Carlson, I think it was his first podcast since he came back from Fox News, did a piece on taboos and changing the taboos. So in our society, and the way our Constitution was set up was there are things that are moral and things that are not. And I was listening to, I think Dennis Prager made the comment one time, the 10 Commandments were God's laws for society. They weren't necessarily just God's people. These particular commandments are necessary.
Civility,
and are necessary in any governing society for civility and for I'm looking for the word here. Functioning. I'll just go functioning society if I
order.
get the other word later on. But the thing that Carlson pointed out in his thing is now they're not attacking our laws, they're attacking our taboos. He got into things like the transgender movement and stuff like that. But I'm thinking about this process and I'm saying, so we can't move a law about class. Let's go back to the no shirt, no shoes, no service. That's a decency point. But then it was no shirt, no shoes, no service. I can't say no shirt, no shoes, no service. No shirt, no shoes, no service. It was a no shirt, no shoes, no color. There was, in a time in our history where that could be part of it, black, white kind of thing.
No,
Now, wait,
okay.
I'm getting to a point. Hang on a second. Bear with me.
There was not, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think that was put up. The sign itself was not acceptable in businesses for the most part. Now, in the South, that was true of some of the signage that was specifically to racial divide.
I know.
But I'm talking
going
about
somewhere.
just as a business.
I know.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
going somewhere. So the decency thing that you're talking about, but then there's
Well,
also...
I've never seen that particular sign you're talking about, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm making it up out of cloth, so a whole cloth. I'm making it up out of nothing. So hang on a second. The point of the matter is there was if we take the idea of we reserve to not give anyone service regardless, and of whatever it is we choose, whatever it is. We as a society said, however, things that are immutable, things that don't change about a person, whether they're black or white or those kinds of things, race being one of them, or class, rich or poor, those things should not be disqualifiers. Therefore, our laws protected those people. Those were
Now,
protected.
wait a minute, wait.
I'm
You're
going
saying rich
somewhere.
or poor is not immutable?
I'm saying that yes, Jesus said the poor you will have with you always. There will always be an element of poor in our society. So
Okay,
yeah,
but
I think to a degree.
to look at a person and
are
say
you
you're
born
poor and you're never gonna-
stuck with it?
Right.
No. Things that may be beyond their control. This is where I'm
Okay.
going at. Okay.
Well, they would say
I can't decide whether I'm
their
white or
sexual
not.
orientation is beyond their control. That's what they would tell you.
This is where I'm going. You're running ahead of the game here. Be
sorry.
patient. So what I'm saying is, so what has happened is where Tucker's talking about they changed our taboos way back when we started to say, hey, race is something people can't change, and we're discriminating people. Some people are discriminating people based upon race. That's not right. Therefore, that's an indecency. That's the way we should treat one another. But before the Civil War, 100 years before the Civil War, slavery was normal. It was considered indecency not to discriminate. So we grew as a country and changed. What they're trying
by
to do now,
some people.
by some, right? And forgive me, I'm working through some of this out loud. What's happening now is people in these other areas like sexual orientation are trying to, since they can't move the law, they're moving the entire genre. In other
Yeah.
words, they're trying to say, well, sex is something we can't control.
That's what I
we
just-
have no power over our own urges. Therefore, we are a protected class just as much as a black person is. Okay, but then we can go to make the affirmative action argument. But however, Asians are excluded from certain schools because they're Asian, and that's another. But that's the other case, affirmative action.
Right.
We're having what's happening in our culture. What's been happening in our culture over time that's just now getting interrupted by court systems, which is what I'm saying is good news, is that people have been trying to change things that can't be really changed. Sexual orientation. I'm sorry, I don't care how many times you want to say it or change it. If you have a attraction or you're drawn to someone of the same sex or you don't think your sex is right, all that stuff is still decision-making power. Because you have an urge for something doesn't mean you are something. If I had an urge to be a black man, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how good I boogied, no matter how good I did whatever stereotype I wanted to throw out there, it's not going to make me change my color of my skin. I mean, even if I move to Africa and I'm in the sun all the time and I darken, I may look darker, but I'm still not born of that same ethnic culture. It's not who I am. It's not how I was created into this world.
Yeah, well, and what they're trying to say is that affirmative action was specifically a making up the difference. I heard this morning on Al Mohler podcast that it was supposed to create not really a reparation, but the idea of balancing the effects of what was previous. You know, if we work at diversity, so we specifically go after making this up because we've messed up for the past however many years. So then it caused another type of racism, another type of racial divide. So bringing down affirmative action was intended to level back the playing field and make academics the actual marker, not the color of your skin or the way you or where you came from, or even poor versus rich. Although he did make the point, some of the bigger schools, the more expensive schools, the Ivy League, tend to also favor like family of previous, of what's it called when you're used to attend. Anyway, of the ones who
I'm sorry, I lost it.
I know
it.
you didn't.
No, I was
hear what
listening.
was saying, but
Say it again.
of people who went to that school, their children get favored. That's what I was trying to say. Can't think of the word.
I can't think of the word either. That's what I was trying to.
Good grief. Anyway.
Why can't I think of the word? Now you got me thinking harder on it. I was thinking you'd come up with it, but you didn't, and I couldn't think of it right away. So now I'm trying.
Alumni.
It's alumni.
Alumni is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but there's
it's a favored status.
Yes, and I'm trying. That's bothering me now. I have to figure that out. It's okay. It's no big
that
deal.
was the word I was trying to think of. That
You're thinking of alumni,
idea
but there's another word for it, and you're right.
Well, it's nepotism or whatever. That's not the right word either. But where it's perpetuated among the higher ups, the elites, a lot of times because they've gone or their whole family line has gone to that one school, they get favored. Anyway, it's just
We only had a comment section where people could live comment and tell us what it was.
That's another angle on type of prejudice that happens at those schools. But what they're trying to bring down and level out is academics should actually play the bigger role. But now another angle that was talked about in that, because of this ruling, I just thought I'd bring it up, was now they're encouraging them how to write these essays, and literally to encourage them to like volunteer in some jungle somewhere so that they face danger, so they can write the story in these essays because the grander your story can be, the more possibilities of you getting into that school. So interesting that you can angle all kinds of things to have favor over someone else.
Well, the thing is interesting, and we're jumping across two of them too, is no matter what you do, especially like in an admissions board. So I'm assuming, I've never been on one, but when a university takes a look at someone's applications, and a higher up one like Harvard or wherever, higher up meaning esteemed whatever. There's a board of people who are looking, or a group of people that are looking over, and people are making decisions. Now the truth is, people are making decisions, and they're going to have their own bias in decision making. What we had, and what the Supreme Court overturned, because the first thing we just talked about was the decision about forcing or compelling people to act against their belief systems because the laws were being shifted to say that if someone believes that they're LGBTQ, that's a protected class under civil rights. The Supreme Court said it's not, because their religious beliefs are in collision with that. Because now, for the first time but what's evolving in our culture is the foundational principles of who we are as a country, rooted in Christian values, like I said, the Ten Commandments, those kinds of things, are being challenged by the culture shifting more to a pagan structure. So the pagan structure is challenging a Christian law structure. And the Supreme Court says, well, the law structure says, no, you can't do this, and they're bouncing off of it right now. And that's what I'm saying is happening, because the law.
Well, and again, in the previous, the previous ruling of affirmative action, they thought they were sort of making up the difference from,
right,
many years of it, whatever the angled preferences or whatever.
Well, in the affirmative action case, I think that there's I don't agree with affirmative action, but at least it was rooted in an actual protected class, in the sense that when the civil rights movement happened in our country, there was an understanding that there was still Jim Crow laws and things like that were in effect, that were discriminating against people based upon the color of their skin.
Right.
The other two decisions that came down were discriminating against people based upon their sexual orientation. The question of class being that, are they both the same class? Well, LGBTQ plus a million plus community, the alphabet community, is saying that we are a class. We are what we are because God made us this way. Well, religious community rejects that whole cloth.
Right.
We don't believe that God made you the way you are. You are following under several stipulations in Scripture that say that these are decisions that you're making based upon following the desires of your own passions, rather than, I can't help it, because it's like me saying I can't help I'm overweight because I was made this way and I was made to be gluttonous. Well, that's not true. I just want more food than I should have. And that's over the course of my life has begun to become a detriment to me, which will happen over the course of anyone's life when they do something that's contrary to the scripture.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
all
okay,
that to be said, that, and which, by the way,
there was
doesn't
a
mean God doesn't
part
love me.
of-
I want to point that out because this is the big argument. Well, you hate me because you don't think I can live my sinful ways the way I want
Right,
to.
right.
That's not what the Bible says.
No, completely separate from that.
Another conversation.
So
The other one is the class issue.
the civil, you just referred to the civil rights, the Declaration of Civil Rights laws that were put into effect, and that was part of what I heard actually is the reason they were able to bring, and it was Clarence Thomas versus who's the one that, Jackson, that did the arguments for and against or whatever, they, like the Supreme Court always has to do the explanations basically, and they were bringing up anyway. It was supposedly that the civil rights case was, or the laws that were put in effect were actually used in this case and were challenged to kind of go back to their original form too. So that was kind of interesting, I thought, and really in a good way. It was as if that was a good law, but it was
when's the
being
sunset
used
on this
wrongly.
law? When do we as a culture grow enough to where it's not a
No.
factor
I mean,
anymore? Is
that
what you
was
mean?
actually a good law. That's what they're saying. But it was written in a good way, and it's been used incorrectly,
Right,
just like
yeah.
a lot of our
Well,
laws
and that's
are.
what I think that Thomas's conversation in the course of that is, at what point does this law become not necessary anymore? And Sotomayor and the liberal side of the court was saying, well, we still have systemic racism in our country. And Thomas is saying, I don't see legal racism in our country. So the argument was over.
Oh, this is the other one you're talking about. That wasn't. I don't know which one you're referring to.
I jumped to affirmative action, which is the same thing. The affirmative action. Okay, so affirmative action.
Well, that's what I.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I was talking about, but it was.
It's happening in the schools.
Clarence Thomas versus Jackson, not Sotomayor. You were referencing.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The other one.
The point that I'm getting at, though, is that Thomas was saying that in the 60s, when we brought these laws out, they were, like you said, they're good laws which was. No, I don't know if Thomas
you're
said that or
not
not.
hearing the. Well, you didn't hear what I heard. I don't think.
Well, that's fine. That's why we're talking about it.
Reference that. Well, I don't have the article in front of me, so I'm not going to be able to exactly.
What I understood
replay
from
what
this
I was
case, and if
saying.
we're bringing two different points of something that's cool, but what I understood from this was that, from what I understood from what you were saying just now, and if I'm hearing you wrong, that's fine. Correct me. Was that the ideas behind what they were trying to rectify back then, whether we agreed with them or not, was that while intentions there were to quell Jim Crow laws and things like that, to put away things that were blatantly legally wrong. In other words, you cannot discriminate against someone based upon the color of their skin, or sexual orientation, in other words, or their sex, like male, female, black, white, or any other color for that matter. These laws are being conflated now to the point to where schools are using them for admissions to help Black Americans get into certain colleges by lowering standards or whatever reasons, or to exclude people. Because what happened in the Asian community was they were excluding higher ranking people because Asians were scoring
That's
higher.
Originally what I said. They decided to go that in these cases they need to go according to academics, which is makes sense.
Right,
But it
and-
was also that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I'm saying is at this point now they're beginning to use the laws as a point of discrimination against a class, or against a race, excuse me. So what's happening is that which was meant to protect and lift up a certain race winds up excluding a race. And it didn't bother anybody at first until all of a sudden Asian Americans can't get into certain
Right.
colleges because they want to favor one class over another. And that's racism. All of that's racism.
Right,
And so
exactly.
what happened is the law went swinging hard in the other direction. And so Thomas's argument was, at what point, I believe it was Thomas, at what point do we have a sunset on these laws? These laws were created to right a wrong, not to continue to govern. Does that make sense?
yeah.
And so that's what's got everybody up in arms, because some people want to say, well, there's still racism in this country. And Thomas is saying, I don't see it. Not like is there racism?
right,
No
right,
more
right.
than is going to normally exist in any country and any culture at any time. And America is the least racist of any country on the planet when it comes down to answering that question of how we treat our citizens, which is funny. As much as noise as we make about it, it's because we're the biggest country in the world. The noise that we make makes a louder landing than it does in other countries. But this is the thing. What else you got?
So here's a paragraph of kind of, I believe pretty much exactly what you're saying and kind of what I was saying. A majority of the court decided at that time, and this is the previous ruling, Grutter versus Bollinger, which is hilarious, in 2003. That's my maiden name. Anyway, that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment allowed for race to be used as a narrowly tailored way to advance a compelling interest in educational benefits that come from the diverse student body. Thomas said that he argued in the Grutter case that the use of race in higher education admissions decisions violates the Equal Protection Clause regardless of whether it is intended to help or hurt. But in decades since, I've repeatedly stated that Grutter was wrongly decided and should be overruled. Today, and despite a lengthy interregnum, I don't know what that word is, the Constitution prevails, he said. So I think exactly what you were just saying. But there was, he said that the country did not always live up to the principle of all men are created equal outlined in the Declaration of Independence, as slavery continued for almost a century after. But the 14th Amendment declared that the color of a person's skin should be irrelevant to their treatment under the law, which should be equal to everyone else. So, yes. So I still want the direct understanding of that Civil Rights Act, because it sounded as if it needs to be upheld, but because it had actually been stated that we're making progress, that we're going toward these things.
Yeah, in truth.
So like you said, it should be reconsidered.
But, and I do think so. So here's the thing. What happens with the laws? So if we take a look at Christian history, let's roll back Christian history and say this real quick. Christian history, well, not Christian history, excuse me, just Israel, we talk about the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments existed as a baseline for society, right? Well, then what happened after that? How many laws did the Jews create based upon the Ten Commandments?
Right.
How many?
Supposedly 600 and something.
630 right? Some odd laws. Yeah. So that's what happened with our Constitution bylaws. Yeah. We have the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says you cannot discriminate against somebody based upon their color or their skin.
Right.
Right? Well, only thing that needed to happen all the way up through 1968 was enforce the law.
Yeah, exactly.
In other words,
what
those affirmative action things were doing were taking cases
such as
where the law wasn't being enforced.
Right. Like you said, the president that went and attacked the ideas or the structure and group of the organization, the Ku Klux Klan, and dismantled them because that was legitimately right against that amendment, right? But then, since then, you're exactly right. We don't seem to notice or stand up for the laws that are already there and use them the way they ought to be. And that's, I'm thankful for a court right now that's trying to at least approach some of these things with realistic viewpoints on what is going concurrently, not what was going on then, or even when we've rewritten some of these different addendums to the Constitution.
I think you're right. And that's something, I think there's good things happening. I think that in some regards we're winning some of these things, and there's more things that I want to talk about. But we need to wrap this up today. We've got some things we got to take care of this afternoon. So maybe we'll come back and visit the recording issue that I started at the head of the show, top of the show, when we talked about being recorded privately in public. Is it okay for
that's an interesting one.
former Project Veritas guy James O'Keefe to be locked out of certain places from doing things? I don't think so, and it sounds like the courts agree, even the liberal courts in Oregon. So anyway, with that being said, guys, we're so glad that you chose to listen. All of you, however many you are. Hopefully there's more than two of you, but usually there's at least two of you, and so we're glad for that. So we'll see you next time. Take care.